Hello, thank you for joining me for Scary Stories for a Rainy Night. If you want to support the channel, please tap the like button for me, subscribe, and introduce yourself in the comments below. I really hope you enjoy. Now let's begin. My friend David was 15, and we often had sleepovers. This night was no different. His parents weren't home, so we had the place to ourselves, making all the noise we wanted in the den. The video games were blaring, music thumping, and junk food was everywhere. I'll skip over most of the early parts to keep this brief. We kept gaming and blasting music until about 4 a.m. when we finally started to wind down. David suggested we take a walk around the neighborhood to settle our nerves, and I agreed. We got back about 10 minutes later. His basement has kind of a strange layout. The house is built on a bit of a slope, so half the basement is above ground. That's the part with the den where we hung out. The other half, which is below ground, has a small room with a TV and couches. That's where we were planning to crash. David threw on a movie and handed me a blanket. I curled up on the couch closest to the basement stairs, while he laid down on the one opposite me. I didn't last long before I dozed off. I was jolted awake by David crouching next to me, shaking my shoulder. He whispered for me to be quiet and told me to listen carefully. It had indeed been more than an hour since we'd fallen asleep. It was still pitch black outside, and the movie was still playing, though someone had muted it. I was half asleep, so it took effort to focus on the sounds he was referring to. But then I heard it. Faint rustling upstairs, like someone going through drawers, followed by two creaks on the floorboards. "I think someone's up there," David whispered. That snapped me fully awake. I initially brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just one of his cats, but what happened next was unforgettable. Two sharp coughs came from upstairs, and that's when pure panic kicked in. Footsteps started heading toward the basement stairs. David looked frozen with fear. I sprang up from the couch and began frantically searching for my phone. David rushed to turn off the TV. Without saying a word, we both made a run for the door on the far side of the basement, not even daring to glance toward the staircase. He yanked open the door and we sprinted across the street, diving into a neighbor's bushes. David called the police while I kept my eyes on the front windows of his house. The moonlight was faint, but it was enough to see a tall figure moving past the huge living room window. David relayed this to the dispatcher, who told us officers were on their way. It felt like forever, but finally, sirens broke the silence, and two squad cars pulled into the cul-de-sac. We ran to the officers and quickly explained everything. Two of them went inside to sweep the house. Another checked the yard and nearby woods, while the fourth stayed with us, asking all the standard questions. Did we see anyone? How did we know someone was in the house? Did we notice anything missing? We didn't have many answers, just that someone had definitely been inside. A few minutes later, we heard someone yell from inside the house, followed by heavy footsteps sprinting toward the backyard. The officer standing with us raced toward the open gate. The intruder was trying to escape through the woods, but got caught when another officer shined his flashlight on him. He was tackled and arrested right then and there. As they led the man back to the car, we got a better look at him. He was huge, had to be at least 6 feet 7 inches and 300 pounds. The officers finished sweeping the house and confirmed no one else was inside. Strangely enough, nothing had been stolen. That part still messes with my head. What was he even doing there? Unsurprisingly, we didn't sleep for the rest of the night. We were too shaken, jumping at every noise and double-checking every door and window. That night when someone broke into David's house, while I was sleeping over, it was without question the scariest moment of my life. This happened when I was 17. My best friend Kyle and I had been inseparable since elementary school. We shared everything: jokes, secrets, late-night walks through our quiet little town. There was never anything strange about him, at least not until that night in the woods. We'd gone hiking behind his house, like we always did. There's a dense stretch of trees back there that leads to this old half-collapsed shed from who knows when. It's kind of a landmark in our friendship. We used to hang out there as kids, pretending it was our secret base. As we got older, it became more of a place to just sit and talk, especially when we wanted to be alone. That night, we had flashlights and a couple of drinks we'd snuck from his dad's stash. We sat inside the crumbling shed, talking about schoolgirls, life after graduation. Then Kyle got quiet. He was staring at something on the dirt floor, not really seeing it. "You ever think about how easy it'd be to just disappear out here?" he said, suddenly. Laughed a little uneasy. "You mean like fake your death or something?" He looked up at me, dead serious. No. I mean, like, if someone wanted to make you disappear, no one would ever find anything. Not out here. I thought he was joking. Dark humor, whatever. We'd both said weird stuff before, but he didn't smile. He just kept looking at me, his eyes flat. Blank. I tried to shake it off. Simone, man. That's creepy. Kyle kept staring for a few more seconds, then looked away and chuckled. Relax. I'm just messing with you. But the tone didn't match the laugh. Felt ... forced. Like he realized he'd gone too far and was trying to pull it back. We left the woods not long after. I remember feeling this weight on my chest the whole walk back, like I couldn't breathe right until we were out from under the trees. Kyle was his normal self again, laughing, cracking jokes, talking about what movie we should watch next time. Something had shifted. I couldn't unhear what he'd said, or unsee the way he'd looked at me when he said it. A few weeks later, I started making excuses not to hang out as much. He noticed, of course. Asked if something was wrong. I just told him I was busy with school, with work, with whatever. We drifted apart after that. I still see him around sometimes. He works at the grocery store near my apartment. He always smiles, says hey, acts like nothing ever happened. But I can't forget that moment in the woods, that cold, quiet moment where I genuinely wondered if I was safe sitting next to my best friend. And I'm not sure if he was really joking. When I was 16, I had a friend named Mason. We weren't super close at first, just part of the same group that hung out after school, but over time, we ended up spending more and more time together. He had this effortless charm that made it easy to trust him, and for a while, I thought he was one of the most genuine people I'd ever met. One Friday night, a bunch of us were hanging out at a mutual friend's house. Mason and I left earlier than the rest, deciding to take a shortcut through a wooded path behind the neighborhood. It wasn't unusual, we'd done it plenty of times before, but something felt off this time. Mason was quiet, focused. Halfway down the trail, he stopped and pointed at a shallow ditch just off the path. Remember that story I told you? He asked. About the guy who tripped, hit his head, and bled out right here? I shook my head. No, I don't think you told me that. He looked surprised, then smiled like he'd caught himself. Must have been someone else I told. Creepy though, right? I shrugged it off, figuring it was just another one of his weird attempts to make the woods feel spooky. The next day, our group chat blew up. Everyone was talking about how this kid, Andrew, someone we all vaguely knew from another school, had gone missing. The police were searching the woods near where we'd been the night before. I didn't connect it to Mason at first, not until he pulled me aside later and whispered, "Don't say anything about our walk last night, okay? It'd be better if no one knew we were out there." That stopped me cold. Why? He hesitated. Because we could get dragged into something that has nothing to do with us. You don't want to get questioned by cops, right? Just trust me. But his tone wasn't reassuring. It was tense, careful, like he was managing me. Over the next week, the search turned up nothing. Andrew's parents went on the news, pleading for help. Posters showed up all over town. Mason didn't mention him again. Then, one night, Mason called me. Late past midnight, sounded ... off, like he was drunk or shaken up. If something happened, he asked, like by accident, "You think a person should come clean?" I sat up in bed. What kind of accident? Silence. Then he hung up. I barely slept that night. The next day I tried to talk to him, but he brushed me off. A few days after that, he moved away. Said his family had to leave suddenly because of his dad's job. No goodbyes, no warning. Andrew was never found. Sometimes I think about what Mason said that night, about the story in the woods, the accident, the call, how, for all his charm. There was always something about him. I couldn't quite pin down something colder underneath. I don't know what really happened out there, but I know what kind of friend Mason really was. Back in college, I had a roommate named Evan. We weren't just roommates, we were actually friends. Went to classes together, played games, partied. He was a little odd sometimes, but I chalked it up to him being a bit of a loner before college. Then, one night during our sophomore year, we were up late playing video games when the power flickered and cut out. Typical dorm building stuff. We lit a couple candles, and while we waited for the lights to come back, Evan said, "Want to play something different?" I thought he meant cards or something, but instead he pulled his desk chair over to the window and opened the blinds. "People watching," he said. "You ever try it this late?" Our room overlooked the back side of another dorm building. From where we were, we could see into several windows, mostly other students just going about their night. A girl brushing her hair, someone cooking noodles in a tiny kitchenette. Nothing too weird. I laughed, thinking it was harmless. But Evan was completely locked in. He stared at one window for a long time, longer than was comfortable. I nudged him. "Dude, you're creeping me out." He grinned. "It's like a game. I try to figure out what people are thinking just by watching. I've been doing this for months." That last part stuck with me. Over the next couple of weeks, I started catching him at the window at random times. Morning, night. He never pulled the blinds shut. Sometimes I'd walk in and he'd quickly close his laptop or minimize something. I didn't think much of it until one night I got up to grab water and noticed he wasn't in bed. Looked over and there he was sitting at the window, still as a statue, staring. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "She leaves her light on too late." I didn't know what that meant, but I remember feeling this sharp chill, like I'd walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. The next day, I found a folder on our shared computer labeled Logs. I knew I shouldn't have, but I opened it. Ow. Inside were dozens of text files, dates, times, descriptions of people in the windows. What they wore, what they did. When they turned off their lights, some files had names. Others had nicknames like Blue Hoodie Girl or Shaky Hands Guy. It was obsessive, detailed, disturbing. I confronted him that night, asked what the hell he was doing. He didn't get angry, just looked at me like I didn't understand. "It's not like I'm hurting anyone," he said. "They don't even know I'm watching." That was the last straw. I talked to the RA and asked for a room transfer. I didn't mention the files. I just said Evan was making me uncomfortable. A few days after I moved out, someone reported being watched through their window. Campus security questioned people in the building, but nothing came of it. Evan acted like nothing happened, like none of it mattered. We stopped talking after that. Sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment and I pass by the window, I think about Evan Ab, the way he watched people without them knowing. And I wonder how many other windows he's stared into since. When I was in elementary school, I had a friend named Liam. He was the kind of kid who seemed like he'd always be around. Quiet, a little intense, but fiercely loyal. We met in second grade and stuck together all through grade school. He was my first real friend. Looking back, I realized there were red flags even then. Liam didn't make friends easily. He got really possessive. When I spent time with other kids, once, when I invited another friend over without including him, he gave me the silent treatment for a week. I thought it was just kid stuff. Things started getting strange around middle school. Liam became obsessed with this idea of forever friendship. He'd say things like, "No matter what, we'll always be together. And other people leave, but not me. Never me." It made me uneasy, but we'd been friends for years, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I tried to keep my distance, gently joined different clubs, started hanging out with a broader group. He didn't take it well. He began showing up uninvited, at my practices, at my house. My mom would smile and let him in, not realizing I hadn't asked him over. I'd find him standing outside my house sometimes, just ... watching. In 9th grade, something happened that changed everything. I was at a sleepover with some newer friends, a small group, just movies and junk food, nothing big. Around midnight, someone knocked on the door. I thought it might be a neighbor complaining about noise, but when I opened it, there was no one there. It's just a small box left on the porch. Inside was a photo of me and Liam, one I'd never seen before. It was taken from behind a bush near my backyard. There were others too. Pictures of me walking home, sitting in class, standing at my locker, always alone, always unaware. There was no note, just the photos. I knew instantly it was him. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went home early and told my parents everything. They contacted the school and the police, but nothing really came of it. No proof, no threats, just ... pictures. After that, I cut Liam off completely, changed my routines, got new locks on the house. My parents never let me walk alone for months. He never tried to talk to me again. Years later, after I'd moved away for college, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Liam had dropped out. No one knew where he went. Sometimes I get the feeling I'm being watched. It's not always just every once in a while. A flicker in the corner of my eye, shadow that disappears when I turn. I tell myself it's paranoia, that Liam's long gone. But late at night when I hear something shift outside my window, I can't help but wonder, what if he never really left? Back in middle school, I had a best friend named Aiden. We were inseparable. We liked the same music, the same video games, even had the same favorite pizza topping pepperoni and jalapeno. Aiden wasn't exactly popular, but he had a kind of magnetic charm. He was the kind of person who could make you feel like you were the center of the universe when he talked to you. So when he picked me as his best friend, I felt lucky. Special. Our friendship grew fast. We'd spend every weekend at each other's houses, playing games until 3 a.m., sneaking sodas from the fridge, and talking about everything: school, crushes, family problems. He told me secrets no one else knew. Like how his dad left when he was 5, or how he sometimes felt like he wasn't real. That one stuck with me, but I brushed it off. Kids say weird things sometimes. Then, around the end of 7th grade, things started to change. It began subtly. Aiden started making little comments, things like, "You're the only one who understands me," or "If you ever left me, I don't know what I'd do." I chalked it up to him just being dramatic. We were kids, after all. But then the notes started. At first, they were harmless. Folded pieces of notebook paper left in my locker that said things like, "Best friends forever," or "You the only real person here." Weird, but I figured he was just being quirky. Then they got darker. "Everyone else is fake, just you and me. Don't trust them. They want to take you away from me. If you leave, I'll have nothing. And if I have nothing, well, you'll see." I started to pull away. I told him I needed space, that maybe we should hang out less. That's when things got worse. One night I woke up to the sound of tapping on my bedroom window. It was past midnight. At first I thought it was a tree branch or maybe rain, but the tapping continued rhythmic and deliberate. I pulled back the curtain, and there he was, Aiden, standing outside in the dark, staring up at me. No smile, no wave, just staring. I freaked out, obviously. My parents called the police, but by the time they checked outside, he was gone. The next day at school, he acted like nothing had happened. When I confronted him, he laughed and said, "You probably just had a bad dream. Maybe you're going crazy." That was the first time I realized he might not just be weird. He might be dangerous. I stopped talking to him after that, blocked his number, told the school counselor. My parents even considered transferring me to another school. I thought it was over. I was wrong. A few weeks later, I was home alone. My parents had gone out to dinner, and I was watching TV in the living room when the power went out. Total darkness. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. That's when I noticed something strange. The front door was unlocked. I always lock the door, especially when I'm home alone. My stomach dropped. Started to hear footsteps upstairs. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I called 911, spring into the phone as I backed into the corner of the room. The operator told me to stay calm and stay on the line. I heard a door upstairs creak open, then another. Then the footsteps came down the stairs. I held my breath, blowed immense. The police arrived minutes later. They searched the house and found no one. But the back door was wide open, and in the hallway, taped to the wall, was a note written in red marker. "Can't ignore me forever." The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Aiden's. My parents pressed charges. The school expelled him. Got a restraining order. We moved to another city within the month. I never saw Aiden again. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I still hear tapping on the window. Just once. Always once. I never look. When I was 8 years old, my family moved to a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York. It was the kind of place where everyone waved hello. Lawns were always freshly mowed, and the ice cream truck still came around in the summer. That's where I met Luke. He lived next door, same age as me, and from the first day we met, we clicked. We played tag, built forts, rode our bikes until the streetlights came on. Luke was a little ... different, though. Not in a bad way at first, just quiet, always watching. He never laughed much, even when things were funny. But he was nice, and to a lonely kid in a new town, that was enough. We spent every day together for years. From 3rd grade through 6th, We were inseparable. He never came to my house, he always insisted we hang out at his. His parents were strange too, cold, distant. I only ever saw them once or twice, and even then they barely spoke. One day, when I was around 11, we were hanging out in his basement, our usual spot. Luke was unusually quiet. He kept glancing at the narrow wooden door in the corner, the one that was always locked. I asked him what was behind it. He looked at me and said, "That's where they keep the bad things." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. A few weeks later, Luke stopped coming outside. I'd knock on his door, but no one answered. I assumed they went on vacation or something. Summer came and went. School started again. Luke never showed up. Then, one night, I was woken up by a sound outside my bedroom window. I pulled back the curtain and saw Luke standing in my backyard. Looked thinner, pale. His clothes were dirty, and his eyes looked ... wrong, like he hadn't slept in days. I opened the window and whispered, "Where have you been?" Just said. They let me out. I asked who, but he was already walking away, disappearing into the woods behind our houses. The next day I told my parents. They called the police. When they went to investigate, they found Luke's house completely empty, furniture gone, dust everywhere. Like no one had lived there for years. But that didn't make sense. I'd been there just a month before. I'd played in his basement, talked to him. The police looked confused, but they didn't push further. My parents figured I'd imagined it, maybe dreamed it. Years passed. I tried to forget about it, moved on with life, graduated, got a job, moved to another city. Luke became a strange childhood memory I couldn't quite explain, until a month ago. I was at a thrift store, browsing through shelves of old VHS tapes and board games, when I spotted something that made my blood run cold. A photograph faded, torn at the edges. But unmistakably Luke. Standing in a basement, I recognized instantly. The strange part. The photo was dated in 1976, and Luke looked exactly the same. Same blank expression, same clothes. Not a day older than he was when I last saw him. I asked the store owner where the photo came from. He shrugged and said it was in a box of donations dropped off by an older woman who looked confused. I bought the photo and took it home. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m. I heard a knock at my door. 3 slow knocks. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. But taped to the door was a note. They let me out again. I don't know who or what Luke really was, but I know one thing now. He wasn't a normal boy, and he's not gone. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My best friend Evan lived 2 streets over, and from the time we were in kindergarten we were practically joined at the hip. He was the kind of kid who smiled a lot, big toothy grins that made you feel like everything was okay. But now I know those smiles weren't real, not even close. Evan's parents started fighting. Loud, angry arguments that spilled into the neighborhood. Sometimes he'd come to school with dark circles under his eyes or flinch when someone raised their voice. I'd ask if everything was okay, and he'd just smile. "I'm fine," he'd always say. Then came the day he stopped talking about home altogether. Instead, he started inviting me over to his house more often. At first, I was happy we'd play video games, eat junk food, stay up late, but I started noticing strange things. Like how his bedroom door didn't have a lock, but he always wedged a chair under the knob before we went to sleep. Or how he'd go completely still when he heard footsteps in the hallway. One night, we were watching a movie when his dad came home. The second the front door opened, Evan's entire demeanor changed. He muted the TV, turned off the lights, and whispered, "Don't say anything." He sat there in the dark, silent, listening to his dad's heavy boots thudding around the house. Eventually, they stopped right outside the door. There was a long pause. Then the footsteps moved away. Evan looked at me and smiled that same wide, hollow smile. "You're safe," he said. That was the last night I ever stayed over. A week later, Evan stopped coming to school. Rumors flew. Some said his family moved. Others claimed CPS had gotten involved, but no one really knew. His house sat empty for months. Then one day a new family moved in. I never saw Evan again, till last year. I was driving through a nearby city for work, stopped at a gas station, and went inside to grab a drink. And there he was, Ivan, standing by the freezer section, wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. But something was ... off. He looked exactly the same. Not like I remembered him. It's literally the same ass if he hadn't aged a day in over 10 years. He turned and looked at me, and he smiled. That same too-wide grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking. "Is it really you?" He didn't answer. Just tilted his head, still smiling, then turned and walked out of the store without a word. I ran after him. He was gone. No cars pulling away. No one else saw him. It was like he vanished. I went back inside, rattled. The clerk asked if I was okay. I told him I'd just seen an old friend. He paused, then said something that chilled me. "You mean the guy who comes in sometimes and just stares at the freezer? He doesn't buy anything? Doesn't talk? He's weird, man. Like, something's wrong with his face." I left without buying anything. That night, I had a dream. I was back in Evan's old house, sitting in the dark, hearing footsteps in the hallway. Only this time the door opened, and Evan was standing there, still smiling. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You're not safe anymore." I woke up screaming. I don't know what happened to Evan. I don't know if he ever escaped whatever horror lived in that house. But I do know one thing. His smile was never real. And now, when I close my eyes, I see it. Every single night. There was a kid who joined our school halfway through 6th grade. His name was Cole. He didn't talk much, didn't smile, didn't really do anything, honestly. Just sat at his desk like he was observing us. Our teacher, Mrs. Kramer, introduced him to the class, and he gave a small nod. That was it. No handshake. No hi. Just stared at everyone with these pale gray eyes that didn't seem to blink. People tried to be friendly. They even invited him to sit with us at lunch. He did for about 5 minutes. Then he stood up and walked away, tray untouched. He never brought lunch after that, never used the bathroom, never had homework. He just showed up and sat there. And then the weird stuff started. It began with the animals. The class hamster was found dead in its cage. One morning looked like it had died of fright. A few days later, someone's cat went missing. Then a raccoon was found behind the dumpsters, twisted up like a pretzel. Animal control couldn't explain it. Then it was the dreams. Almost everyone in my class started having nightmares different but similar. Dark rooms, cold whispers, a figure standing in the corner watching, always watching. When we compared stories, we realized the figure always had pale gray eyes, like Cole's. I told my mom, but she brushed it off. "Kids have nightmares," she said. "It's normal." But when I told her about the animals, about how Cole never ate or spoke, she got quiet. Then she looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Do you still sit near him?" That was the first time I felt truly afraid. The final straw came during a group project. We were paired up, just me and Cole. I was dreading it, but figured I could get it over with. We went to my house to work on a science board. He didn't speak for the first hour, just stared while I did the work. At some point, I asked, "Where are you from?" He slowly turned to me, then said so softly, I barely heard it, "Far from here." His voice didn't sound right, not like a kid's voice. It was flat, too deep, like it echoed, even though we were in my bedroom, and he smiled. His teeth were all wrong, too many, too sharp. I ran downstairs and told my mom to make him leave. She didn't ask questions, just said she'd take him home. But when she came back, she was pale. "He doesn't live anywhere around here," she whispered. I drove for 20 minutes. He told me to stop in front of an abandoned barn. Just got out and walked into the woods. He didn't come to school after that. Mrs. Kramer said he transferred again. But when we looked up his name in the district system, there was no record. No birth certificate, no enrollment file. It was like he never existed, but he did. We all saw him, felt his presence. Sometimes, I still dream about those eyes, that smile. And once, just once, I saw someone standing in the woods behind my house. Pale gray eyes, glowing in the dark, just watching.